What scares me the most about Brexit isn't the direct consequences of Brexit, it's the consequences of those consequences. For example, most Brexit voters don't like the deal we just spent 3 years negotiating, and even if we left without a deal, they probably wouldn't like the deal we ended up negotiating after that. Put it this way, the deal we just negotiated means we give up our say over the laws of the EU, but follow them anyway. And given that the slogan in 2016 was, "Take back control," most Brexit voters are not happy. And even the sort of deal that Boris Johnson, King Brexiteer, is now asking for would still mean that the EU would have control over the laws of certain parts of the UK without us being able to shape them. And if we end up with a Brexit that nobody wants, that means a lifetime of Brexiteers blaming Remainers saying they ruined Brexit, and Remainers blaming Brexiteers saying they ruined the country. On the other hand, what happens if there's no deal at all for a significant period of time? Half of the cars that we make go to the EU, half of the fish we catch goes to the EU, a third of Welsh lamb goes to the EU, in fact it's 90% of Welsh lamb exports. And a no-deal Brexit means that the EU, under international law, has to put tariffs on all those products, which means that those industries will suffer, which means that those jobs will go. As for the NHS, pretty much the entire medical community is saying that Brexit is bad for the NHS, and the British Medical Association, which represents over 120,000 doctors across the UK, says a no-deal Brexit would be a catastrophe for the NHS. Now this is the advice of doctors across the UK. Who better to go to when we're talking about healthcare across the UK? And the highest police authorities in Northern Ireland say a no-deal Brexit would be a definite security risk. That's because the Good Friday Agreement that brought about peace after 3,600 deaths was signed by the UK and Ireland explicitly in the text as EU members. So obviously Brexit messes with that. That's why the people of Northern Ireland voted against Brexit. Now, if there's serious damage to jobs when there are already so many people struggling, record levels of people using food banks, if there's serious damage to the NHS, the organisation that literally saves lives across the UK, if there's serious damage to the peace process in Northern Ireland, you know that that will come at a human cost. And the only way a no-deal Brexit happens is if there's enough people in the UK who genuinely think, we don't really need the EU that much. Which means that if a no-deal Brexit happens, and the obvious happens, and you have people across the UK who lose a child in an NHS that can't get the staff it needs or is struggling to pay for the increased price of drugs, or people are losing their jobs and can't feed their children, or the obvious happens in Northern Ireland, that won't be seen as something we've done to ourselves. That'll be seen as an act of aggression by the other countries of the EU. And you've already heard the narrative from the big Brexiteers. The EU's trying to punish us, they're trying to bully us, they want to make an example of us, they don't want us to leave, they don't want to give us a good deal, constant references to the war, calling them the enemy.
My view is that yes, the EU is the enemy.
So when the obvious happens, are the Brexit politicians going to take responsibility for what they've done? No. They'll see that everything you're suffering, everything you've lost, is other European countries doing this to you. And there is no limit to where that can lead. Now I'll admit, this has been a pretty dark video, but there is one ray of hope. That is, if we actually stop Brexit by having a referendum, which is the only democratic, logical way forward, we can devote all the resources, all this energy to fixing the problems that led people to vote for Brexit in the first place. Starting with all the issues that have been ignored for the last 3 years, the NHS, policing, housing, but going further than that, fixing the regional inequality that left so many people behind in this country. So we can spend the next 7 to 10 years holding politicians' feet to the fire to make sure that they invest in those areas they never cared about and getting rid of first past the post. Or we can spend the next 7 to 10 years negotiating with the EU and Trump, continuing with this whole Brexit thing because it's been going so well.